Good evening. We're now recording the meeting, and the meeting is also being recorded by CATS, so that way we have a public record of attendance. Purpose for tonight's meeting is to hear from you, members of the general public, about the fiscal year 2024-2028 Transportation Improvement Program. Please note that this is a draft document. The Transportation Improvement Program outlines the capital needs for Bloomington Transit, Rural Transit, Monroe County, and the City of Bloomington from federal fiscal year 2024 through 2028. The federal fiscal year begins on July 1st of 2023 is the beginning of fiscal year 2024, and then that goes until June 30th of 2028. This Transportation Improvement Program is a federal aid requirement from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Our document covers projects that are to be funded by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. We have a formal presentation in terms of the slides that we'll present tonight. We'll go through that, and first I want to introduce myself. I'm Pat Martin with the staff of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and then to my right is Rachel Sargent, who's also with the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We have business cards available here. We have emails. We'll be meeting with everybody one-on-one after this formal presentation, and we are here until 8 o'clock tonight. So ask all the questions you wish to ask, and we'll be here until then. We'll even stay until after 8 o'clock if you so wish, but we'll have to go out to dinner first. Okay, with that, I'll let Rachel take over with the presentation that we have tonight.
First, I want to ask that everyone sign in. To the people joining virtually, please put your name in the chat and we can get started. Also, if you can't hear me online, please let us know. So what is an MPO? We're a transportation policy making and planning body with representatives of local, state, and federal government transportation authorities, multidisciplinary experts, and citizens. MPOs are required in urbanized areas of 50,000 or more. They ensure federal investment spending on transportation activities that occurs through a comprehensive, cooperative, and continuing 3C process. We also have a variety of organizational arrangements, often hosted by another agency, standalone, existing agency designated as an MPO by the governor. What does an MPO do? Transportation investment means allocating scarce transportation funding resources appropriately. Planning must reflect the region's shared vision for its future. It requires a comprehensive examination of the region's future and investment alternatives. And MPOs facilitate collaboration of governments, interested parties, and residents. We also establish a fair and impartial setting. We evaluate transportation, operational, and capital investment alternatives. We maintain a long-range transportation plan. We develop a transportation improvement program, which is what we will be talking about tonight. We often involve the public residents and key affected subgroups, and usually that is through a public participation plan. What is a transportation improvement program? This is a document developed in cooperation with state and public transit providers that lists upcoming transportation projects, often covering a period of at least 4 years. Ours covers 2024 through 2028, so that's 5 years. This is often just referred to as a TIP. So TIPs include capital and non-capital enhancements, federal land highway projects, and safety projects included in the state's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. The TIP should include all regionally significant projects, including Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration funds, or for which FHWA or FTA approval is required, in addition to non-federally funded projects that are consistent with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. The Bloomington Monroe County MPO has 4 local planning agencies. This is Monroe County, the City of Bloomington, Bloomington Transit, and Rural Transit. Here is the outline of the BMC MPO planning area. So you can see in green the entire planning area. In the red-orange color, that's the urban area boundary, which incorporates Ellettsville, and the incorporated area, you can see Ellettsville and Bloomington there. This is the schedule for the TIP. So in January, we called for projects. We requested the application deadline in the middle of February. The Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, and the Citizens Advisory Committee, CAC, project requests, project reviews, and fiscal constraint issues were talked about in late February. The Policy Committee, the PC, reviewed project requests, project reviews, and fiscal constraint issues on March 10th. The TAC and CAC federal program category allocations, LPA applications received, and fiscally constrained programs were reviewed in late April. The Policy Committee reviewed the federal program category allocations, LPA applications received, and fiscally constrained programs on May 12th. The legal advertisements went out on May 12th and May 14th. The 30-day public comment period began on May 12th, as Pat mentioned. We submitted the draft TIP submission to NDOT on May 15th. We are now having the public meeting tonight on May 22nd, and the TAC and CAC will review the final draft and provide recommendations on May 24th, this Wednesday. The 30-day public comment period will end on June 10th. We hope to receive comments from NDOT, FHWA, and FTA on June 30th. The PC will, we anticipate approval of the final TIP in August 11th, and then we will submit the TIP and get the approval letter from FHWA, FTA, and NDOT in September. So we have the authorized program funding levels. I have broken out the types of funding and also the fiscal year. Please note that fiscal years 27 and 28 are illustrative. And the total, what was the total, Pat?
$358 million.
Thank you. So the authorized program funding levels, there are a few rules regarding this. No prior year rollover funds. We are allowed to adjust the TIP projects if needed. New projects are allowed for 2027 and 2028. And again, fiscal years 2027 and 2028 are illustrative. We require the contract letting dates and also NDOT designation numbers. Construction engineering phase costs are required. Highway safety improvement programs must prioritize low-cost systemic funding projects. Transportation alternatives require an additional application, and we also require a public comment period and a public meeting. For fiscal years 2024 through 2028, the TIP requires a project request form, including transit. The HSIP application is low-cost systemic improvements for prioritization ranking. There's a spot intersection improvement for prioritization ranking. Transportation alternatives application and supporting documents have separate guidelines. And then we also follow the complete streets evaluation scoring for eligible new projects. For Monroe County, the old State Road 37 South and Dillman Road applied for funding in years 2026, 2027, and 2028. The Vernal Pike Connector Project requested funding in 2024. The Fullerton Pike Phase 3 roadway and bridge requested funding for 2024. The Liberty Drive connection to Karst Trail requested funding in 2024. The 2022 to 2026 Bridge Safety Inspection and Inventory Project requested funding for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. The Rockport Road Bridge number 308 Replacement Project requested funding in year 2024. The Pedestrian Trail Crossing Improvements requested funding in year 2024. Dillman Road Bridge 83 Replacement Project requested funding in year 2024. The Eagleson Avenue Bridge over the Indiana Railroad requested funding in fiscal years 2024, 2025, and 2026. And now moving on to the City of Bloomington projects. The High Street Intersection Modernization and Multi-Use Path Project requested funding in 2024 and 2026. The Covenanter Protected Bike Lanes and Intersection Improvement Projects requested funding in years 2024, 2025, and 2027. The Crosswalk Safety Improvements Project, Phase 2, requested funding in 2025. The Crosswalk Safety Improvements Project, Phase 3, also requested funding in 2025. The Downtown Curb Ramps Phase 4 project requested funding in fiscal year 2024 and 2027. The Downtown Curb Ramps Phase 5 requested funding in fiscal year 2026. The Beeline Trail Connection requested funding in 2024. North Dunn Street Multi-Use Path requested funding in 2024 and 2026, as well as 2028. The Signal Timing Project requested funding in fiscal year 2024. The Go Bloomington Transportation Demand Management Program for Bloomington and Monroe County requested funding in fiscal years 2024 through 2028. The West 2nd Street Modernization and Safety Improvements Project requested funding in fiscal year 2024 and 2025. Moving on to rural transit, they requested a project for 4 cameras with DVR systems for 10 rural transit buses in fiscal year 2024. And also for rural transit operations, they requested funding for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. For Bloomington Transit, funding was requested for federal, state, and local assistance for the services, including late weeknights service for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. The purchase of a 40-foot battery electric bus and charging equipment was requested for funding for fiscal years 2027 and 2028. The purchase of a 30-foot electric bus, and as well as the charging stations for fiscal years 2025 and 2026. Purchase of a Bloomington Transit access vehicles for fiscal years 2025 through 2028. Land acquisition for Grimes Lane expansion for fiscal year 2024. And then they requested funding for capitalize the purchase of the engine and transmission rebuilds, hybrid energy units, and tires for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. Purchase support and maintenance vehicles for fiscal years 2025 and through 2027, as well as the design and construction of the Grimes Lane expansion. Funding was requested for 2025. And then we are happy to take any questions or comments. The presentation is also available at the front here in physical copies.
I might note that we also include Indiana Department of Transportation projects in this draft transportation improvement program. Given the long list of those projects and our limited knowledge of those projects, we chose not to highlight those in the presentation tonight, but we would encourage you to review all of those projects within the document itself. The Indiana Department of Transportation currently will go through a public involvement process. I believe that's starting this week, and it goes through June. Their posting of their projects is available on their website for the entire state of Indiana. The projects that we have identified are merely within the urbanized area of our jurisdiction. Anything outside of our jurisdiction, we do not include in the document. So the number that I gave you, total cost of the 5-year program of $358 million, that includes all the projects from Rural Transit, Bloomington Transit, Monroe County, City of Bloomington, and the Indiana Department of Transportation. Again, we have printed copies here. We have electronic copies available also for downloading. After this formal presentation, Rachel and I will meet with you one-on-one to discuss individual projects or groups of projects or projects from individual sponsors. And again, with the Indiana Department of Transportation projects, we'll do the best we can. We have public comment forms that we fully encourage you to use to provide back to us in terms of how you view the program, any questions you may have about the program itself. And trying to think of anything else. No, that's it. Unless there are questions, we'll be happy to answer any questions anybody may have from the audience right now.
We have a couple of questions online, so I am going to unmute Lisa Thomason. Give me a second,
Okay.
Lisa. Okay, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to comment on the transportation plan and these projects. The one that I'm most interested in addressing right now is the High Street Multi-Use Path Project. I actually live on High Street in the part of High Street that's going to be affected by this proposed plan. And so when I saw that this was in part of the plan, I decided that instead of getting pretty upset that the city wants to condemn my property and is actually planning on condemning my property and my neighbor's property and taking a good bit of our land to put a path through my front yard. I know people really like being away from a street. Not that being a few feet away from the street is going to make anybody really that much safer. You'd have to put a Jersey barrier there to keep people safe if somebody's texting and driving. But I know people want to be away from a street and still use the path, but we have sidewalk there now. And so I thought, well, I better learn a little bit more about multi-use paths. So I don't make a lot of money. My salaries are better public record. I'm a tenure excluded faculty member. We've lived in this house for 25 years. My salary's gone up $20K in that time. Our property taxes have doubled. And they tell me the value of my house has doubled. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. The bedrooms are small. One's a closet. The others are the size of a dorm room. So it's not like we're living in a palatial area here, but it is our home and our children were raised here and their Christmas trees are in the yard and so forth. And we're about to lose all that. But I thought I better look up what's going on with multi-use paths. And so one thing that I can do is research, and the scientific research on multi-use paths indicates that, first of all, they're not used by bicycles. And it shouldn't be presumed that they will be, that bicyclists prefer roadways and bike lanes because they're quicker and more convenient. They don't have to navigate walkers and so forth. And so multi-use paths do not increase bicycles as an alternative to cars. That's the first thing to note. And I see in the projects, there's a TBD covenant or bike paths that, not bike paths, but bike lanes. And that's really what the recommendation is, that bike lanes are looked to first because that's what bicyclists like to use. In addition, multi-use paths are not for destination-oriented traffic. They're for destinations and features. So multi-use paths around the goat farm, for example, in Bloomington, along canals and walkways are appropriate uses for multi-use paths. They're not citywide solutions to replace sidewalks. They're not an everything but cars alternative, and they're not intended for city streets in front of houses where you have driveways with people pulling out and coming and going because they're not safe. So it's not an appropriate location for multi-use paths because of the visibility, the poor visibility, and the lack of access. And yet on the stretch of High Street that we're talking about for this project, it is all driveways and residential areas. It's a neighborhood that was put in. It's one of our oldest streets in town. A lot of cities in Europe have a high street. This is our high street. It used to be the dividing line between the city and the county. And my house is in fact over 100 years old and is a notable house. We're the third owners. And it looks materially the way it did over 100 years ago. And High Street does as well with its mature trees. And it's very pleasant in the summer because it's shaded, and it's beautiful in the fall. And we have bluebells and so much in the front yard. My neighbors have gardened. They put in beautiful gardens, and many of these folks will not be able to even pull a guest into their driveway when their driveways are cut in half. They'll only be able to fit one car in. And having these people try to pull out across a multi-use path is going to be really terrible. You don't see heavy use of the multi-use path that's south of Hillside, but that whole area was platted as subdivision. So when those houses were built, they were built with the expectation that there would be that potential easement and setback. And when that multi-use path went through, which is not heavily used by any means, and the people there have difficulty pulling out, but when that path was put in, it replaced largely grass and a few trees. That's really not the case with High Street, proposing on condemning these properties where you're taking people's gardens and a lot of mature trees to put in basically 2 and sometimes 4 times as much impermeable surface in a neighborhood that has substantial flooding problems, where High Street is continually potholed and has to be filled all the time. And our neighbors have had 3 feet of water in their basement. There's serious drainage problems in High Street, and the road is continually undermined. And it's a bit shocking that you can propose a transportation plan that doesn't take into account all the other infrastructure. But this is a part of High Street that was not platted as subdivision. These are residences, some of them notable. Ross Lockridge's boyhood home is on High Street. There are a lot of bigger houses there that have more setbacks, but there's a lot of smaller houses on the side that's proposed where we don't have those kind of setbacks. So I know it's attractive to see millions and millions of dollars for federal, millions and millions of federal dollars with a smaller match from the city to improve things, but this would be a tremendous and regrettable mistake, because paths, multi-use paths, are not intended for these particular purposes. These are not super sidewalks, and they change the character of a location. So I'm pretty confused by a transportation plan that seems to exist without integration with other considerations of the city and the city systems relevant to transportation and our streets, which include infrastructure like the stormwater problems we have here, as well as historical considerations. So when we look at High Street, there is not a comprehensive stormwater runoff or stormwater sequestration plan, and that's really part of the problem we have here. And the plan does include pulling out countless mature trees, including things like beech trees. There are quite a few of them on this street, which do not compartmentalize, which means that they can't be cut back, so you lose those trees. And every time in a big rain, until you have maybe over 2 to 4 inches of water, they pull hundreds of gallons of stormwater out of the system. They never reach it. And it's the same thing with all the yards that are in through there. And I really don't see that consideration. So what you're going to add is you add acres of impermeable surface, something that you would never allow any development to do, to add this in an asphalt path that's going to add so much runoff to a street that already floods and throws potholes after every rain. So this is one of our oldest streets, which is really spectacular. And the thought that the city council approved and the mayor's office approved and engineering approved and transportation now approves making these kinds of changes to this street is really just unconscionable. And the other thing is, once this kind of thing is done, aside from condemning people's properties, taking their yards, changing the character of the town, it can't be undone. You can't put it back. And I've lived in this town a long time. I remember when we saved the courthouse and people wanted to tear down the courthouse, and that's part of the character and the history of this town. And High Street is also part of the character and the history of this town. So this solution to transportation, to add a bunch of paving and change the character of a historic street, is a change that can't be undone. This isn't like choosing to wear parachute pants and get a different haircut, and then time will pass and we can look back and laugh. This is something that's going to fundamentally change the character of a historic part of a town. As I said, not a part of the city that was platted as subdivision that isn't substantially changed, but an older part of the city. So, to take all of this out and put in the manicured monoculture of subdivisions and, finding $1.1 million to condemn people's property in the budget to take people's yards, I don't think is a wise decision. It's upsetting to me personally to have my children's Christmas trees go, to have the reason I bought this house go, the historic nature of this street. For my neighbors, my heart is just sick to see what's going to happen to their gardens. And at the first meeting about the High Street multi-use path, one of our councilmen actually went and said that when he voted for this, he was not made aware that there would be, and maybe he didn't read it carefully, that people's properties would be condemned. This is also redundant with a greenway project and a path that, in which somebody's property was condemned, not a half a block to the west. So there already is a path that goes north to south, that goes to a wide path that people use to go to school, to bike, and to go through the neighborhoods. And the covenant or plan for bike lanes is another plan that will improve it. And people use these roads and they use these sidewalks. And but once you pave this in this fashion, which is an inappropriate solution, it's gone and you really can't put it back. This is a neighborhood with homes on it, with sidewalks, and so it should remain. We have our old street light that was part of the original property. We have a cistern, you see one at Spring Mill Park, because that's how old this farm street is. It's a neighborhood street. The houses were designed for the setting and the scale of a sidewalk. And taking 15 to 20 feet of somebody's yard matters significantly. Moving utility poles, which is an expensive proposition, to put utility lines up in people's windows is really a terrible thing to do. So I just have to say, I urge you not to move forward with this plan, to reconsider. If you want to come up with a plan that moves the sidewalk inboard a little bit, it's more appropriate. I would really appreciate that, because people won't be able to pull out safely. There won't be privacy for all these homeowners. And I don't understand how you can do that to the people who live here, how you can change the character of the street for something that's inappropriate, that's going to look dated 10 and 20 years down the line, just because there's federal money for something that is an inappropriate and ineffective solution. I mean, everybody wants to feel like they can walk a little further from the road, but this isn't the solution for here. It's not an appropriate site for a multi-use path. And the transportation plan has made a project that's more at home in a park or a subdivision, but not in the cityscape where this should not exist. This is, removing substantial things that are here. So I'm going to implore you to not pave our yards, to look at the cost to the quality of life here, to use the existing greenway and multi-use paths that are already here, and think of something that is not redundant with existing solutions, that people are already using these alternatives, using the sidewalk, and it's not going to increase alternative transportation, and it will certainly not decrease car use. What it will do is inconvenience a lot of people and change the look and the character of the plan of the town. And removing this many mature trees, which can't be replaced with climate change, we're going to have more water flowing into the system. We're not going to be able to grow these kinds of mature trees. We have them now. We're sequestering carbon, and it's really not going to get any better. So there needs to be a lot more attention paid to the infrastructure for stormwater runoff, particularly in this area, which has caused so many problems. And you just have to look at the continual patching and look at how many times that we've had to put in the potholes. So I'm urging you to please rethink this plan to protect the character of the street, the mature trees, the gardens, the flowers, and don't condemn my and my neighbors' properties. To leave us with the sidewalk that is distinctive to this part of town. It's not just a chance to take federal money and spend federal money, but really to preserve what we have and not make things worse, because it just gets worse and worse every year. Thank you.
Thank you. We will include every word that you said in terms of documentation.
Thank you. So I believe Greg Alexander is next, so give me just a second, Greg, and you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I had a little Zoom trouble. I just had two quick questions. I figure it's actually probably really good answers for them. The first is, I see there's metrics for like safety, and I guess it was Appendix 2 or something. I'm sorry, I don't have the citation. And I was wondering if there's any sort of report I could look at to see how we're doing once you have a metric, pass or fail, improvement or not improvement. And the other question is, I've been looking forward to the Walnut and College thing. They're doing a study now, and I was wondering, that doesn't seem to show up in this tip. I was wondering if it's like in the pipeline for 2027 or whatever. So thanks.
Well, in answer to your first question on the metrics are statewide metrics determined by Congress, where it's safety, preservation, and that. The metrics are evaluated every year by the state of Indiana in the Department of Traffic Safety, or Division of Traffic Safety at the Indiana Department of Transportation. In terms of our local metrics, we don't have those, but we do keep track of those on an annual and actually less than an annual basis. I mean, we're tracking those sometimes every month, where we're looking at crash locations and severity rates, and we investigate all fatal crashes in the urbanized area. In answer to your second question about the Walnut and College Corridor study, that is not a federally funded project. That is a City of Bloomington initiative, and that initiative is being led by the Planning Department, Planning and Transportation Department, planning more than transportation. And that's already begun in a stepwise process in terms of bringing the information out there of look for the study coming soon. There was a call for volunteers to serve on an advisory committee. That closed, I think, in the end of April, I believe. There is a schedule being developed. Beth Rosenbarger in the Planning Department is developing the schedule on that. There are links. We're doing walkabouts, for lack of a better word, of different sections of the corridors with citizens, where citizens can sign up for those corridor walks and go out. And actually, we spend 2.5 hours out there on the ground looking exactly at the problems. And we're not telling anyone what the problems are. We're letting everybody tell us what the problems are. And then all of those are being recorded by Beth for when a consultant will come along and assist with that study. Does that answer both of your questions, Greg?
Sorry, Greg, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your comment, and I will, Polly Terracone, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My name is Polly Terracone. I just wanted to express my hope that the projects that are prioritized from these federal dollars moving forward are really going to move towards sustainable transportation, not just sustainability in terms of ecological, but also in terms of financial. It's been frustrating to see how many tens of millions of dollars have been kind of squandered on car-based infrastructure that requires very large amounts of dollars for maintenance over the course of decades, when we should be moving more towards more resilient kinds of infrastructure that prioritizes pedestrians and bicyclists, not just for ecological sustainability, but for, again, that financial sustainability. I'm curious a little bit about this mixed use path between Liberty Drive and Cars Farm Park, because I frequently ride my bike out that way to get to either Aldi. I have unfortunately ridden out to Walmart and almost been killed the 2 times I tried. Because the mixed use path very much abruptly stops when you're going west on Bloomfield to Liberty Drive. That's when it ends and then spits you out on the road. Makes for a very uncomfortable, very dangerous experience for anyone not in a car. So I'm excited to hear there's like some intentions to maybe extend that all the way to Cars Farm, but I'm a little bit curious about like maybe which side of the street it's supposed to be on, and if it will have any kind of connections into those stores that are there. It's got Walmart, Aldi, Sam's Club, and the like. So I appreciate this presentation as well. Thank you.
Sure. We will pass along your questions to the Monroe County Highway Department on this. The Liberty Drive connection to Cars Farm, it's a continuation of the West 2nd Street project, which was completed by the City of Bloomington, I think in 2016 or so. And it currently goes to the Interstate 69 interchange and stops east of that. This would be, the Indiana Department of Transportation added in capability for bicycle and pedestrian movement across or through the interchange of West 2nd Street or Bloomfield Road, whichever you want to call it, or State Road 45. They added that in, but then it ends on the west side of the interchange. And the intent of this project, to our understanding, is a continuation of that down to Constitution Avenue, I believe it is. And then it would circumnavigate its way through there to Cars Farm. And Cars Farm, recently, they've done the connection, or they completed the connection from the Cars Farm Park all the way up to Ellettsville. And the intent here is to have a seamless multimodal pathway from center of Bloomington all the way to Cars Farm Park and all the way up to Ellettsville, and actually north of Ellettsville. At least that's the intent of the project. But what I can do is, since we're recording all of this and documenting all of this, we will pass this along to the Monroe County Highway Department to ensure that they're aware of your concerns and your questions. Does that help?
Very much. Thank you.
Sure.
That addresses all of our online questions that have raised their hands. Does anybody have questions that attended in person? Sarah, if you don't care to come up to the podium for the microphone. Thank you.
Sarah Ryder Band. My concern is a nearly $4 million roundabout at Old State Route 37 and Dillman Road. I grant that Dillman Road offers some rather challenging aspects in terms of visibility. And I'm wondering why a simple stoplight can't address the rapid traffic on Old State Route 37 and make this a safer intersection for those on Dillman Road who wish to cross over.
Thank you, Sarah. We will record all of this and pass this information along to the Monroe County Highway Department.
Any other comments from our in-person audience or our virtual audience?
Jeff McKim. This seems kind of weird to comment as a member of the public, as I'm also a voting member of the MPO Policy Committee, but I wanted to express again, just like one of our commenters on Zoom, a support for the multi-use path connecting to Bloomfield Road to the Cars Farm Greenway. This is a really exciting project. It's been a long time in conception, and I'm actually honestly kind of surprised we're going to be able to pull it off, because it didn't seem feasible several years ago. But the idea right now is that it will take the existing multi-use on the north side of Bloomfield Road that ends at Liberty, take it on the east side of Liberty north to Constitution, then the north side of Constitution to Curry. My understanding is there'll be a full traffic signal there on Curry, and then it will cut across new terrain directly, almost as if Constitution was extended west. It will continue till it hits the Cars Farm Greenway. And yeah, so I just wanted to express my support and excitement for that kind of project.
Thank you, Jeff. We will document your comments and pass those along to the Monroe County Highway Department. Yes, Sarah?
Yes, and as Jeff was just speaking about multi-use pathway, I wanted to address what I heard in the lengthy concerns about High Street and a multi-use pathway. I'm quite sure that the city when when and if it develops, the High Street multi-use pathway will address engineering problems causing flooding in people's basements. That would be part of their project, especially if they knew, and I heard them get a lot of comments from people at that public meeting about areas of concern in the neighborhood. I'm mentioning the multi-use pathway because it goes up 2nd Street. And for many people who wanted to go west on 2nd, it was very dangerous to be bicycling. Since the addition of the multi-use pathway, I noticed more people walking and bicycling west on 2nd Street in what is now a much safer environment. There are other places in the city, I'm thinking about 3rd Street as well, where there is a multi-use path where often those who are on bicycles feel safer being there than in the street. There are those of us who will bicycle regardless in the street, but there are many people who don't feel safe in the street on their bicycles. So while I understand that there are a lot of concerns, ecological and residential and in many other respects with the High Street project, I think it's an amazing thing for us to be able to have that north-south connectivity so that people on that south end could actually bicycle to the university, for instance, safely. Yes, they can go through some other streets, but they have to do a whole lot of dancing to get there. This is a direct path, and I think it's a great addition. In fact, I'd like to commend the city in general for the number of projects that I see in the tip that address pedestrians and bicyclists, those of us who prefer not to use motor vehicles to get to our destinations. I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, we will document every comment that you've made tonight. We also fully encourage everyone to submit comments online through the Transportation Improvement Program webpage. We fully encourage you to contact either Rachel Sargent or myself at any time through our email addresses or telephone. We're here constantly, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. And if we can't answer any questions, we will pass those along to the agencies who sponsored the projects from the very beginning. Are there any other questions by anybody? Yes, Sarah. Okay, for members of the audience that are out there, the question is, did we have additional metrics called complete streets through which we evaluated all of the projects? And the answer to that is yes. We had a number of new projects that were evaluated in terms of complete streets. From Monroe County, it was the Old Dillman Road and State Road 37 project. We evaluated that in terms of complete streets, or what are called safe streets and roads for all, through the Indiana Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration. One moment here. I'll flip to the City of Bloomington projects. The Covenanter protected bike lanes and intersection improvements was also subject to the complete streets. Crosswalk safety improvements phase 2, crosswalk safety improvements phase 3, downtown curb ramps phase 4, downtown curb ramps phase 5, and then the proposed North Dunn Street multi-use pathway that was also subject to complete streets. And the complete streets scoring and the evaluations and the metrics are all documented in the Transportation Improvement Program, which you can download online electronically, or if you wish to see it in paper form, you can visit us at the Planning and Transportation Department, and we'll be happy to provide you with paper copies. Does that answer your question, Sarah? Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. And Lisa has another comment, so I will unmute you, Lisa. You should be able to. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question, actually. One of my neighbors brought this up at the first and only other meeting about the High Street multi-use path project, when everybody was pretty much blindsided by this kind of presented. Apparently a number of things had happened that folks weren't aware of. And what my neighbor had mentioned was, and you can let me know if this is correct, or maybe our misunderstanding is not correct, that High Street had been a secondary collector, and as such, it wasn't an appropriate change for High Street, but then a change was made in how High Street was classified within the last year or two that allowed the project to be proposed and move forward. Is that correct? Can you give a little bit of background about this, a little insight? Thank you.
Sure. To our knowledge, Rachel's and my knowledge, no, we're unaware of any functional classification change. It's a collector? Is that correct? I honestly don't know. It must be well, it can't be a local street. It has to be a collector or a minor arterial or an arterial to become eligible for federal funding. But as far as the classification of the street goes, I'm not aware of that. What I can do is I can do the research and provide you with an answer on that. And also whether it was reclassified recently or not. Again, we'll ask that question and provide an answer to you if that helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? For those in person, feel free to peruse the physical documents, the boards. There's a map up there. There's business cards and some stickers up here from our department. And we appreciate everyone coming, and we will be still taking comments and questions until 8 o'clock or longer if needed.
And please note that this was fully recorded. It'll be online through CATS. So that way other people who may not be in attendance tonight, either virtually or in person, can go online and view the entire recording and view all the entire questions. The public comment period, again, is open until June 10th. We encourage you to fully respond to the public comment period. We will actually do a verbatim transcript of your comments tonight and include those in the final document, which will be provided to the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and the Indiana Department of Transportation. So if there are no other questions, then we will close this portion of the program. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a movement for adjourn. Any other questions online? No questions in the House. Okay, thank you very much for attending. Please contact Rachel and I if you have any additional questions. We'll be happy to answer those. Thank you.